just gave a series of lectures at Columbia on the philosophy department. One of them was on the theme of something I called 40 years ago, problems and mysteries. Problems, meaning by that a distinction between matters that we are in principle capable of understanding. We may not understand them, but they fall within our cognitive reach. You can imagine how we might understand them. Those are problems. Mysteries simply fall behind our cognitive reach. And those are quite deep-seated. They're right in the physical sciences. They're not recognized enough, but if you look over the history of the physical sciences, and then when you get to the social sciences, this magnifies beyond discussion. But at the core of the physical sciences, the hard physical sciences, there are mysteries for humans which are tacitly understood to be beyond the level of understanding, human understanding. There's classic moments of this. You take the early modern scientific revolution, which began basically with Galileo and his contemporaries, early 17th century. They wanted to overcome neo-scholastic mysticism going back to, with its Aristotelian origins. They were confronting a scientific world in which explanations were given in terms of what were called occult forces, sympathies, antipathies, things fall to the ground because that's their natural place, so on and so forth. They wanted to give Galileo and others wanted to give real explanations. And they had a concept of explanation, of intelligibility, namely, there had to be a mechanical explanation. The world had to be accounted for as a machine. And by machine, they meant something very concrete, something that an artisan could build, something with gears and levers and so on and so forth. And in fact, it was supposed to have been built by a super skilled artisan. So an intelligible account for, say, Galileo would be an account in terms of mechanical principles. It was called the mechanical philosophy. And philosophy just meant science in those days. So mechanical science. The world is a machine. Galileo recognized that he was incapable. He lamented at the end of his life. He'd been incapable of accounting for the motions of the planets, the tides, and so on in mechanical terms. So this was not yet understood, but the concept of intelligibility was clear. This goes through the next century. The great scientists, Huygens, Descartes, Leibniz, Newton, all believed in the mechanical philosophy. And then a problem happened. And Newton discovered that it's false. The famous body-mind problem is based on the assumption that body is explicable in mechanical terms. Mind, Descartes recognized that there are things that aren't explicable in mechanical terms. Actually, the main one was normal use of language for good reasons, in fact. So that was the basis of mind. You had these two substances. Newton showed there are no bodies. He showed that nothing is explicable in mechanical terms. There are no machines. This is totally misunderstood, especially in the social sciences, where it's assumed that Newton showed that the world operates by mechanical principles. It's a big machine. He showed the opposite. He showed that you cannot account for it in mechanical terms. Newton regarded this as a complete absurdity. He said no person with any scientific intelligence could accept this, and he spent the rest of his life trying to overcome it. He had various... the problem was, how can you account for action at a distance, interaction without contact? So how can it be that if I move my hand, I move the moon? There's no contact. That's the mystical force. But he was correct. It was an absurdity, but it was true, and it points to something that goes beyond the level of human intelligence. How can we deal with a world that's based on occult forces that we cannot comprehend. We have to accept them because they're true, but we can't comprehend them. Well, what happened, and this was well understood by his contemporaries, by John Locke, later David Hume, right through the 18th century. Since then, it's been forgotten. The concept, science simply limited its goals. The sciences since Newton have not attempted to develop an intelligible account of the universe. They've lowered the goals to trying to develop theories that are intelligible. That's a much lower goal. To understand a theory is one thing. To understand what it's talking about is another thing. But that goal has been abandoned. Well, there's a dramatic example of something beyond the level of human intelligence. And it goes on from there. When you go into more complicated things than basic physics, it expands all over the place. So, for example, human choice or animal choice is completely unintelligible to us. I mean, you can't deny that it happens. We all know perfectly well that we make choices and we make decisions. But it's not only beyond the range of existing science, no one has a coherent idea of how you could explain it. Probably because it lies beyond the bounds of human cognitive capacities. I mean, if you think of the things we can understand, they pretty much reduce to determinism and randomness. So we understand things being determined, like a machine. You know, you turn a lever and something else turns. Or a thermostat. I mean, that kind of thing we understand. The concept of random behavior, that was understood in the 17th century. You know, some things just happen randomly. But suppose something falls beyond the bounds of determinacy and randomness. Well, it's beyond our cognitive capacities. And that's what will and choice seem to be like.